To understand why Israel and Iran are at war and the critical role the United States plays in this volatile dynamic, it's important to look beyond the headlines and consider the deeper motivations that have shaped the region's history for decades. On the surface, the most recent escalation was sparked by Israel's Operation Rising Lion, a preemptive strike on Iran's nuclear infrastructure, and the subsequent American-led Operation Midnight Hammer. These military operations followed years of mounting suspicion that Iran's nuclear program might soon reach a point where weaponization was possible, something Israel has long viewed as an existential threat. But the conflict itself, and especially the coordination between Israel and the United States, is rooted in far more than just fears over uranium enrichment or missile technology. At its heart, the struggle is about power, influence, and the future order of the Middle East. Israel's concerns about Iran are both practical and deeply existential. Since the 1979 Islamic Revolution, Iran's leadership has openly challenged Israel's legitimacy, supporting groups like Hezbollah and Hamas, which have engaged in armed resistance against Israel. Tehran's regional strategy has been to build alliances and proxies that can both deter Israel and project Iranian power across the region, from Lebanon and Syria to Iraq and Yemen. For Israel, this axis of resistance is a constant threat, encircling it with hostile forces and undermining its security. Yet, it is Iran's nuclear program that has most alarmed Israeli leaders. For years, Israeli officials have warned that a nuclear-armed Iran would tilt the regional balance of power irreversibly, emboldening Tehran and making it nearly impossible for Israel to defend itself from both direct and proxy attacks. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has made dismantling Iran's nuclear capabilities a central pillar of his security policy, repeatedly arguing that preemptive action is not only justified, but necessary to ensure Israel's survival. But is preventing nuclear proliferation the only or even the primary reason for this aggression? Critics argue that the nuclear issue is, at least in part, a pretext. Drawing on the lessons of the 2003 invasion of Iraq, a war justified by claims of weapons of mass destruction that never materialized, many analysts suggest that Israel and the United States are pursuing broader strategic goals. For them, a weakened, fragmented Iran is far preferable to a strong, independent one. Not only would this limit Iran's ability to support anti-Israel groups, but it would also remove a major obstacle to American and Israeli dominance in the region. This perspective helps explain why calls for regime change in Iran have become increasingly open. Following the recent strikes, both American and Israeli officials have hinted, and sometimes outright stated, that their ultimate aim is to see the end of the current Iranian government. The logic is straightforward. As long as the Islamic Republic remains in power, it will resist Israeli and American interests, support the Palestinian cause, and challenge the regional status quo. For the United States, Iran has been a perennial adversary since the 1979 hostage crisis. Beyond the nuclear issue, Washington's broader aim has been to contain Iranian influence, maintain the security of key allies like Israel and Saudi Arabia, and ensure the free flow of oil through the Persian Gulf. The Strait of Hormuz, a narrow waterway through which a significant portion of the world's energy supplies pass, is a persistent point of leverage for Iran and a source of anxiety for the West. Any conflict that threatens to close this choke point can have global economic repercussions, giving Iran a powerful, if dangerous, bargaining chip. Yet the American approach is not only about energy security or nuclear non-proliferation. Since the end of the Cold War, US policy in the Middle East has often been guided by a desire to prevent any single power from dominating the region. The clean break strategy, articulated by US neoconservatives in the 1990s, called for using military and political pressure to weaken or topple unfriendly regimes, thereby securing Israeli and American interests. The invasion of Iraq in 2003, the chaos that followed, and the subsequent rise of non-state actors all fit within this broader strategy of reshaping the Middle East to favor Western and Israeli dominance. Today's confrontation with Iran follows this same logic. By striking at Iran's nuclear facilities, the US and Israel are not just trying to delay or destroy its nuclear ambitions. They are sending a message to the entire region about the costs of defying their interests. At the same time, by floating the idea of regime change and encouraging internal dissent, they hope to destabilize the Iranian government from within, potentially paving the way for a new order more amenable to their priorities. However, this strategy carries immense risks. Iran's leadership has already warned that continued intervention could trigger a regional war, drawing in not just Iran and Israel, but also American forces and allies across the Middle East. The possibility of the Strait of Hormuz being closed, even temporarily, threatens to disrupt global energy markets and plunge the world into economic crisis. Moreover, the use of military force has historically fueled anti-American sentiment, strengthened hardliners in Tehran, and increased the likelihood that other states will seek nuclear weapons of their own as a deterrent. Beneath these immediate dangers lies a deeper pattern, the politics of instability. For both Israel and the United States, a divided and weakened Middle East is easier to manage than one dominated by strong, independent states capable of resisting their influence. This policy of divide and rule has been a recurring theme in Western engagement with the region for over a century, from the Sykes-Picot Agreement to the present day. But the costs of this approach are steep. War and intervention have left a legacy of suffering, displacement, and broken societies across the Middle East. In the case of Iran, attempts to destabilize or topple the government risk unleashing new waves of violence, empowering extremist groups, and pushing the region further from peace and stability. In the final analysis, what Israel and the United States want from Iran is not simply the end of its nuclear program, but the transformation, or at the very least the containment, of its role as a regional power. Their actions reflect a desire to maintain a regional order in which their interests are unchallenged, even if that means perpetuating conflict and instability. As the situation unfolds, the people of the region, and indeed the world, will continue to pay the price for these behind-the-scenes ambitions.